You hear the click-clack, you see the strut, you see that the wearer is standing straight up, or they're stumbling around looking like a newborn horse. So today we're talking about high heels, folks. Now, many don't know that this particular article of clothing, known to be the embodiment of the feminine essence, started life as a men's fashion item in the military. The technological and functional purpose of the high heel originally wasn't to actually make people taller or to make your legs look good. Instead, it was actually to help soldiers who were riding into battle remain in their stirrups while they were riding their horses. You see, in Persia in the 10th century, which is the earliest known example of men wearing high heels, they were actually worn by soldiers who were riding into battle. And at that particular point in time, they were known to also be aristocrats, soldiers and of a mercenary class that were wearing those particular shoes. Now, we know that soldiers in Persia at this time were wearing high heels because of an excavation from a dish that was found from the 10th century from Nishapur, Iran, clearly showing that the soldier was wearing a high-heeled shoe that looked kind of very similar to a Western cowboy boot. Now, the 1-inch high heel was considered to be the standard Persian equestrian attire, and that standard remained the same for hundreds of years, which later resulted in the import of the high-heel shoe around the beginning of the 16th century. It's also important to note that in 16th century Persia and Europe, because horse ownership was inherently tied to wealth and aristocracy, the heeled shoe naturally evolved to become a piece of equipment that showed that there was affluence and authority with that person who particularly wore that item. And Europe took notice very, very quickly and followed that same pattern as well. It is documented that in 1599, the Persian Shah Abbas I dispatched a large diplomatic delegation to various nations consisting of Spain, Germany, Russia, and England to forge military alliances. And what did their soldiers wear? Well, those 1-inch high-heeled shoes. And those 1-inch high-heeled shoes really caught each of the European courts by storm. But a lot of people liked it and saw how masculine and domineering these soldiers were because they were standing taller than normal. With that being the case, they took notice and decided to adopt the high heel shoe and put a little spin on it of their own. And the arrival of the high heel shoe in Europe came right on time because throughout the 1600s and into the 1700s, men's fashion or male fashion was hyper-focused on trying to emphasize the legs. They wanted to show the thighs and the calves, and so they wore things like stockings and silk tights to really show off their hamstrings. European courtiers actually wanted to use high heels to frame the leg because of the ergonomic changes that happen when you wear high heel shoes. When you wear high heel shoes, your pelvis will tilt forward, it will force an upright posture, and also further flex the calf muscles and hamstring muscles to make them look more defined. Because high heel shoes actually allow people to look taller and present to be longer and leaner, they appeared more domineering. And aristocrats and rulers really liked that effect because of course they would, right? Now, Louis XIV, however, he took it to another level because Louis XIV actually made multiple laws and rules within France to govern who could wear high heel shoes, what type of high heel shoes they can wear, and when. He said, no. My heels must be the tallest, and so his high heels were 5 inches high. And he actually forbade anybody else within his kingdom to wear high heels that were taller than his. Additionally, Louis XIV had a decree about the color of high heel shoes and what they would demonstrate. So for instance, Louis XIV said, if you are not banging with me or rocking with me, you cannot wear red high heel shoes. Only people who are in favor of the king's court can wear red high heel shoes. And stylistically at that time, high heels also got a lot more elaborate because there was silk, there was a lot more cuts and colors, different types of materials were being used. It was no longer necessarily about the utility of the shoe, but actually how it looked too. However, the great masculine renunciation happened around the time of the French Revolution, basically changing the notion of men's fashion and what it should actually look like. Male fashion and dress post the French Revolution was more so about utilitarianism and uniformity. And they really did not want to see anything that really gave you a sense of opulence. They didn't want to see anything that gave you a sense of ornamentation because it was a rebuke to the aristocratic establishment at the time. And as a result, high heel shoes fell out of favor for men because it was seen to be feminine, passé, and quite frankly, just not utilitarian in terms of use. There's also a bifurcation of men's and women's shoes. So women's shoes, they became narrower, they made out of more delicate materials such as wood, and often they would have a lot more ornamenture on side of the shoe just to make it look a little bit more pretty. But with men's shoes, it was wholly about utilitarianism and purpose, which means that the shoes usually had a thicker sole, they were bigger, and usually they were a little bit more bulkier as well, made from leather, and also more durable material. The resurgence of the high heel took place beginning with the Western cowboy boot, which again had the very same purpose of what it had in Persia, to keep people in their stirrups when they're riding horses. Then later on, the engineer boot played weighed in on that as well because it allowed for men who were riding motorcycles, women who were riding motorcycles to keep their feet in the stirrups of their motorcycles, which meant that, again, the boot had a utilitarian purpose and it had a heel on it. Beginning in the 1960s, the beetle boot, which is basically a Cuban heel that was attached to a Chelsea boot, became the thing that was in vogue. And from that point forward, we had the likes of David Bowie and Prince to push us even further as far as our heels imagination for men. And then when we get to the new millennium, we have Rick Owens, who released his first prototype of a high-heeled shoe in 2005, along with the myriad of other designs that has come from his house since then. And as we've seen in the last few years, men's high heels has grown in popularity, even going down to the likes of being featured on ASOS. So as far as we know, the history of men's high heels is very, very complicated, but there is a resurgence, and the way how they look is quite a bit different than what they used to look like in history. But if you found this interesting, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button, and come back for more. Toodles!